So good to have you join us today. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Jaein. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. A lot of eyes are on the U.S. Federal Reserve as it convenes its FOMC meeting on Tuesday and Wednesday, with markets confident the June rate hike is imminent. Despite its relatively small market in Korea, a growing number of companies are turning to upcycling as they transform seemingly useless materials into new, unique products. These stories and more coming right up. President Moon Jae-in has nominated 4 additional ministers on Tuesday since his inauguration last month. According to Cheongwade, Yoo Young-min, a former executive of LG CNS and head of POSCO Research Institute, has been named the new Minister of Science, ICT, and Future Planning. Jo Myung-gyun, a career bureaucrat from the Unification Ministry, has been named the new Unification Minister, while former lawmaker Kim Young-nok has been tapped as the new Minister of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Affairs. As the new Minister of Gender Equality, Chung Hyun-baek, a professor and women's rights activist, has been nominated. Out of 17 key ministerial positions, 2 have yet to be filled following today's announcement. The chief of Korea's central bank met with the country's new finance minister, Kim Dong-yeon, who also serves as deputy prime minister for the economy. He and BOK Governor Lee Ju-yeol discussed fiscal and monetary policy under the new Moon Jae-in administration. And the meeting comes in less than a week since Kim was confirmed and signals the new minister's emphasis on the role of the country's central bank. For more on this, our Kim Ji-yeon joins us on the phone. So Ji-yeon, rarely do we get to see these 2 leaders come together.
That's right, Jaein. It's actually the first time in 3 years the country's finance minister and deputy prime minister paid a visit to the Bank of Korea to have a luncheon with the BOK governor. And it's also surprising that the visit took place even before Finance Minister Kim had his own inauguration ceremony at his ministry. Take a look at what they had to say.
I come here today to celebrate the 67th anniversary of the establishment of the Bank of Korea. Just like the National Assembly, the Bank of Korea is a very important institution in terms of leading and managing the local economy. I hope my visit helps promote future cooperation between the Ministry of Strategy and Finance and the Bank of Korea.
I'm glad the local economy is slowly showing signs of improvement, but we should not loosen up just yet in view of several factors. Externally, those include the widely expected U.S. rate hike this week. And in Korea, chronic structural problems including massive household debt and high youth unemployment. I believe the Deputy Prime Minister will utilize his abundant know-how, experience, and leadership to promote consistent mid- to long-term policies that will undoubtedly result in favorable outcomes.
Their meeting comes after a day the BOK governor hinted at the possibility of monetary tightening for the first time in more than 3 years and ahead of a widely expected U.S. rate hike this week. And such a move could deal a blow to the new finance minister, who is trying to gain support for expansionary policies to promote the new Moon Jae-in government's supplementary budget proposal to create new jobs. This has been Kim Ji-yeon for Business Daily.
Korea's new finance minister, Kim Dong-yeon, has pledged to take strong action against real estate speculation and coal markets that are showing signs of overheating. Meeting with other ministers on Tuesday, Kim said he is closely monitoring property price trends in Seoul and a number of areas that look to be overheating. He said the government will crack down on speculative practices, but ensure no harm is done to those looking to make legitimate transactions. The average price of major apartments in Seoul's southern Gangnam-gu district has jumped by nearly $90,000 in the past month alone. From an early summer and a drought to the bird flu, food prices here in Korea are being hit hard. There's also growing concern that egg and chicken prices could rise even more as avian influenza rears its head again, sending authorities on a hunt. Our Eunice Kim has more.
The price of livestock products last month jumped by double digits, recording the biggest spike up in 3 years. The cost of eggs rose by nearly 68%, while the price of chicken rose by 19% and pork 12% in the month of May on year. This on the back of lower supply of chickens and eggs following the massive culling of poultry, sparked by the country's worst bird flu outbreak last year. And just when it seemed authorities finally had a handle on it, news of unreported pathogenic birds, dozens still unaccounted for.
My family eats a lot of chicken, so it's disconcerting news. We'll still have to eat it even if prices are higher.
And of course, it doesn't stop there. In some cases, fried chicken prices are reaching $18 per bird, while the cost of ice cream, which counts eggs among its key ingredients, has risen by 7 to 14%, backing up a recent OECD report that put Korea 5th among 35 member countries for biggest jump in food prices in the January through March period. Not helping have been the unseasonably hot weather and a drought that's taking a toll on the country's farms, dealing with the second lowest rainfall since records were kept in 1973. No doubt the costs of a poor harvest will be passed on to the consumer in the form of rising vegetable and fruit prices. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
In light of all this, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yeon has pledged to stop the spread of avian influenza and take measures to counter the continued drought that's crippling crop yields. In Tuesday's cabinet meeting, Prime Minister Lee hinted that the bird flu outbreak, which originated in Kunsan in the southwest, may be coming under control, noting there have been no new cases reported in the last 2 days. Regarding the drought, he said this year's rice harvest will suffer if conditions persist. He urged relevant ministries to closely monitor the damage and draw up mid- and long-term plans to address potential problems. President Moon Jae-in's Policy Planning Advisory Committee decided Tuesday to put the Science Ministry in charge of formulating policies related to the Fourth Industrial Revolution.
The Science Ministry will put forth effective policies to prepare Korea for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It will be in charge of monitoring technological and market changes, including the industrial structure.
The Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning will also have a separate division dedicated to science and technology innovation. The division will gather R&D policies from all relevant ministries and undertake decision-making related to budgets. LG Display has now led the global display market for 30 straight quarters. A recent survey from research firm IHS Markit counted 35.4 million units shipped by LG in the first quarter, giving it a 21.4% market share. While lower than the some 39 million shipped in Q4, the company still came out on top, holding its spot since the fourth quarter of 2009. LG also led in sales, clinching just under 28% of the global market. Meanwhile, Samsung Display is expected to stay number one in the small and medium-sized display market in an IHS report due later this month, as it has for the past 6 years. Korea has been pushing to create a more vibrant startup scene here in the country, but a recent report shows the money is not quite there to back things up. In particular, concerns are mounting that this may place it at a disadvantage in the rush toward the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Our Elia Kim tells us more.
When it comes to GDP, Korea sits just outside the top 10 in the world. But compared to many of the economies above it, its venture capital investment lags far behind. Korea Economic Research Institute took a look at the relationship between venture capital investment and gross domestic product. In dominant venture markets like the US, venture capital investment accounted for 0.37% of GDP in 2016. In China, it was 0.28%. But in Korea, it was only 0.13%. And while China has doubled its percentage from 2014, Korea's has stayed stagnant. There are concerns that if Korea doesn't narrow the gap with China, which is now the largest venture market in Asia, it might fall behind or be left out of the hyper-competitive Fourth Industrial Revolution. The report's advice for the short term is to increase annual investment to nearly $3 billion to raise the proportion up to 0.2%, a figure much closer to China's. It also stresses the importance of corporate venture capital investment to grow market quality and size, noting the U.S. market and the role of CVC investment in startups rather than financial institutions. The institute adds that much of Korea's existing CVC investment originates from conglomerates, and additional regulations on these business groups may create more hurdles for startup investments. This is especially because the Fair Trade Act currently blocks additional investment in startups by conglomerates if they're acquired by that business group. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to raise its key rate for the second time this year on Wednesday. Now, the Fed had left the federal funds rate target between 0.75% and 1% at its last meeting in May. And now a 25 basis points move to an upper bound of 1.25% is on the cards. So what does more tightening from the Fed mean for the Korean economy? And what impact will it have on Korea's monetary policy from here on out? To tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-seok from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. So good to see you.
Happy to be here.
All right, so there's little doubt that the Fed will raise rates this time. So does this mean that various economic indicators are in line with the Fed's targets?
Okay, well, the first quarter, the numbers are very good. There were very few hiccups, but still, the numbers for the most part were very good. Second quarter numbers have also been mostly good, but there has been some more hiccups. But still, the current numbers are, I think, sufficient for Fed to raise the interest rate another 0.25%. The unemployment numbers were 4.3%, which is less than what the Fed believes the full employment rate is, which is 4.7%. Okay. And even further, the wages have been rising. On an annualized basis, it rose by 2.5%, which is higher than the sum of the inflation rate and the labor productivity growth rate. So they think that the not only is they reaching full employment, but even the wages are rising, and that could be a signal for inflation in the future. Now, as I mentioned, there has been some hiccups. The first quarter growth rate has been adjusted downwards, so it's only about 0.7%, and that's down from 1.9% in the fourth quarter last year.
Right.
And the economically active population is still lower than what had happened before the global financial crisis. So a lot of people are arguing that the Fed should keep the rates lower for longer. But I think it's the unemployment rate and the wage increase that's really getting to them. So they'll probably raise the rates this week, but they may think about not raising the rates as quickly for the rest of the year.
But then the Fed had signaled another rate hike could come later this year. So what are some of the factors that could affect this rate trajectory? Okay,
well, when they made that pronouncement at the beginning of the year, they were looking at Trump euphoria in the stock market. They were looking at the Republican Party's plan to give a large tax cut and an infrastructure investment plan. Now, all of those things are now in question. So that's a problem. And as I mentioned before, there has been a lot more hiccups in the second quarter. The first quarter growth rate has not been as high as they hoped. And there has been some question on whether U.S. exports will continue to rise. So I think they're going to begin again from sort of the blank page, see if the numbers justify further increases in interest rate, and they may not necessarily keep the promise they made earlier in the year.
Now, if the Fed raises the Fed's funds rate target from the current range of 75 basis points to 1% to a higher target range of 1.25%, that would be on par with Korea's current record low interest rate of 1.25%. So how would the Fed's rate hike in June affect the Korean economy?
Okay, well, I think the time when Korea can lower the interest rate is pretty much over if the Fed does raise the rate this week. Then the rate for the United States, the policy rate at least, will be the same or higher than Korea because, well, they work from the range. They will work from the range of 1.25% to 1.5%.
Right.
Now, having said that, though, policy rate is not exactly the same as the market rate. The Korean market rate has been rising since the second half of last year, and it's risen by, depending on what type of loan it is, the bank rate for interest rate for loans has gone up between 0.3 to 0.6%. What we're very worried about is a large capital outflow because the Korean rates are lower than the US rates. But that may be true for the policy rates, but it's not quite true for market rates yet. So we probably won't have a large capital outflow that everybody's concerned about. But if Korea lowers its rate, policy rate, then we may actually have a problem with the market rate being lower than US market rate, and that will cause serious problems.
And also just yesterday, the Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol, for the first time in 3 years, said that the BOK may raise rates in the near future. Now, what led him to say this? Okay, well, the obvious factor is the Fed considering rate increase, but also Korean economy has seemed to be recovering for the first part of the year. The exports has been rising, though consumption and investment has been disappointing. But still, a lot of people are putting a lot of hope on that exports to spark a recovery. And if a recovery starts, then Korea may have to raise its rates. But right now, I don't think the Bank of Korea really wants to raise the rates because the inflation rates are actually fairly low right now if you exclude food. If you look at the CPI inflation, it's only about 2%, and the core inflation rate is actually a bit lower than that. So it's doubtful that the Bank of Korea thinks the economy is strong enough to raise the rates. And there will probably be some political pressure to lower the rates, but because of the Fed's decision, that's probably not going to be possible. Now, in the U.S., so it's probably likely that we're going to see it raise rates this week. So, what can we expect at the BOK's next monetary policy meeting, and also what can the Korean government and the BOK do to prepare for future rate hikes in the U.S.?
Okay, well, the BOK not only probably does not want to raise rates because, well, they're also worried about the household debt problem. They don't want to raise the interest rate burden for people who have borrowed money. But still, I think that they are going to have to consider raising the rates if Fed raises the rates once more. So that's
this year,
yes,
right? Yeah.
This year. So that's going to be one problem. I think they're going to have to monitor capital flows very carefully. If the capital outflows from Korea accelerates, then I think they'll have to raise the rates very quickly. If the exchange rate fluctuates a lot, if the value of the won drops suddenly, then also you will have to raise the rates quite quickly. So I think the numbers to watch out for is capital outflow and the exchange rate.
All right. Well, for now, we'll keep our eyes on the FOMC meeting results on Wednesday. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Two major cryptocurrency exchanges here in Korea were paralyzed for a time on Monday, one day after cryptocurrencies hit new highs on Sunday. According to industry sources, the websites of Bitsum and CoinOne were both down around 8 o'clock last night. Shortly after this, Bitsum said it was shut down trading for 30 minutes for an emergency server inspection in response to a spike in visitors. One day prior, the value of Ethereum had spiked to 477,000 won, or $422. The Ethereum streak has been pushed up by investors in Korea, where more than 1/3 of its trading comes from, according to monitoring site Crypto Compare. With the ultrafine dust hanging in the air this spring and summer, respiratory health is a huge concern for people here in Korea. And those worries are well justified, as a recent study shows that air pollution kills around 14,000 people in the country every year. Our Park Ji-won reports.
During a seminar in Seoul organized by the Institute for Climate Change Action, the results of several studies were released, including one that says because of air pollution, around 14,000 more people in Korea die every year. Professor Chung Hae-kwan of Sungkyunkwan University School of Medicine quoted last year's joint study by his school and the Environment Ministry, claiming that nearly 14,000 people died in Korea in 2013 due to air pollution. This figure is 4.5% of the total number of deaths that year, meaning that 1 in 20 deaths in 2013 was caused by air pollution. The study showed air pollution, including ozone and fine dust particles, affects multiple organs and has long-term consequences, including lung cancer, pneumonia, heart attacks, and strokes. A similar study conducted last year by the OECD also forecasts that the number of premature deaths in Korea will be the highest among OECD countries in some 40 years. The paper estimated that by 2060, about 1,100 out of every million people would die due to air pollution, which is 3 times greater than the figure in 2010. Park Ji-won, Business Daily.
Now, the concept of upcycling is still relatively new here in Korea compared to some other countries, but there's no denying that the market is getting bigger by the year. Our Lee Joo-young has the story.
Hundreds of thousands of banners decorated the streets of Korea during the country's recent presidential election. But now that it's over, the question is, where did they all go? What cost as much as $3.4 million to produce has now been transformed into this, an eco bag that are worth $14 a piece. About 3,000 of them were sold in a matter of a month. First, you measure, cut, and then sew. This handmade eco bag is the brainchild of upcycling social enterprise Touch for Good. It uses some 400 materials to transform seemingly useless materials into new products, all while reducing waste. Established 10 years ago, this 13-person company has been commercializing various upcycled products like hot packs made out of car seats or jump ropes from processed cosmetic bottles. But Touch for Good CEO says one of her favorites is this air freshener made out of old floor panels from school classrooms.
예전에 우리 막 청소하던 추억들도 있고 여러 가지를 떠올리게 하는 그냥 나무로서는 절대 불가능한 교실 바닥으로 업사이클링 했기 때문에 가능한 감성 같은 것들을 가지고 있죠.
Another personal favorite of hers is this bag made out of discarded military parachutes.
I realize that the product or the brand needs to have value for consumers. When people look at products, the most they typically ask is how much was it, where did you get, or what brand is it? But when it comes to upcycled products, there's an actual story behind it, like who made the product, the thought process behind it, and why particular patterns were used. I think these stories add color to the lives of our customers.
According to Korea Upcycled Design Association, the country's upcycling market has continued to grow, reaching about $8.9 million last year from $2.2 million back in 2013, as efforts to tackle waste gain more traction in the country. The amount of garbage thrown out has been on an upward trend. The most recent data indicates that levels from 2008 jumped by 32% to 74,000 tons in 2014. A shared concern about this waste burden is what moved major manufacturer Colin Industries to launch Recode, the world's first upcycling fashion label created by a large firm. Made up of a team of 4 designers, Recode takes deserted garments and upcycles them into clothes, bags, hats, and various accessories.
For us, we can't really cut patterns in one go, so we have to work on them one by one, and that's pretty difficult. But on the flip side, it also means the value of the product goes up because a lot of effort goes into each and every piece.
The 5-year-old fashion brand also holds various upcycling classes for the public to raise awareness and has its very own flagship store in Seoul that's seeing an increasing number of customers.
First of all, consumers love that the clothes are unique and fashionable.
A lot of people tend to ask who our competing brand is, but we're not just confined to the upcycling market. We're competing with other general fashion labels.
While Korea's upcycling sector is still small compared to other countries, experts say its potential for growth is huge.
Some firms in Korea have been implementing measures to cut processing costs and protect the environment, but these efforts have not necessarily translated into new businesses. I think when we have more firms like these, the country can also see success in the upcycling industry.
Progress is being made on the government level as well, as Korea is looking to open up its first upcycling public space this September to educate people and foster new businesses. With more time, effort, and interest, the country will be headed towards a more sustainable future ahead as local governments, companies, and consumers work together to promote the culture of creative recycling. Lee Joo-young, Business Daily.
And that wraps it up for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.